We are demanding a fair deal now for Alberta within Canada. One that respects the Constitution and gets Ottawa out of our way so that we can do what we do best. What Alberta has always done: grow our economy, create jobs, get people back to work, and generate an oversized contribution to Canada's wealth. As I said earlier, our government is prepared to deploy every legal, economic, and constitutional tool at our disposal to maximize our leverage and to win a fair deal for Alberta.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney there says he has a plan for his province. On Saturday, he detailed all the options to get what he calls a fair deal in the Federation. They include everything from Alberta creating its own tax collection system and its own police force to dropping out of the Canadian pension plan. Kenney has convened a panel to weigh in on securing that, quote, fair deal, a panel that will include former Reform Party leader Preston Manning. Manning raised some eyebrows over the weekend by saying a referendum on secession needs to be part of the strategy, but not the whole strategy. So why is separation the one thing Kenney has left off his list of options? Time for the Power Panel, of course, in Calgary. Kelly Kratterman of the Globe and Mail joins us. Melissa Lantzman of Hill and Knowlton is in Toronto. Next to her, Council of Public Affairs Brad Levine. And joining us from Montreal, former Quebec Liberal Cabinet Minister Yolande James. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Kelly, I'll start with you. Tell us a bit about what Premier Kenney is talking about and how it's being received.
Well, you know, there's a lot to parse out there. It's being received in that I think there was an expectation that this was coming. Everybody knew he was announcing a panel that Preston Manning is a part of that will look at Canada or Alberta's place in Canada and fairness. And we knew this was coming. We didn't know his was a sprawling speech. It was over an hour long. And, you know, he went into so much detail about Alberta's grievances right now, the challenges to the economy, talked about what Alberta will do no matter what this panel will look at. And also, you know, you saw a list of things that will go to, I think, very much appease growing anger in Alberta right now. There are a lot of people who feel a lot of anger about equalization payments happening without any feeling of reciprocity when it comes to building pipelines. And I think he spoke to that constituency. There were some strong words on that. At the same time, and I can talk about this more later, you saw Jason Kenney, the pragmatic politician as well. If you listened carefully, there were things that he said in his speech that would be palatable to the federal Liberals in Ottawa, which is kind of the amazing part of his speech as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the things, Yolande, for example, they were drawing comparisons with some of the things that Quebec has, running its own police, things along that nature, or withdrawing from the CPP. What do you make, I guess, of those comparisons and of sort of what Kelly touched on there, some of the more pragmatic things that would perhaps lend themselves to some kind of negotiation with the federal government?
Well, I mean, there's several aspects to it. I mean, the fact that Alberta wants to, in certain jurisdictions, a sort of greater autonomy is not something that should necessarily be frowned upon, especially if you look to Quebec as an example, or different federal programs that we can opt out of, Farmer Care being one of them, and with full compensation. I don't think that in and of itself is an issue. Where it's a delicate balance is to really look at what's at the heart of it, in that clearly people in Alberta are very upset, and the economy is at the heart of that. And we've seen and commented a lot about the fact that the election results creates, obviously for the government, but as well for Premier Kenney, but the other premiers, to see how we can best unify the country. But I think that where there's a question is to say, are these measures really truly coming from a place where he feels that these are going to be an improvement for the Federation, or are they laying out the table as a leverage for a negotiation? And I just think that's important to be careful with how you want to be able to play that game. Obviously, if you make the comparison with Quebec, there are people for a long time that you obviously believe as Quebecers in a strong autonomous Quebec and a federation. But a lot of people over the years, if you know, have pushed that as a preamble to separation. And they're not just trying to use that as leverage in a negotiation. That is the ultimate goal here. So I think I understand where he's trying to go with that, but it's a really dangerous and delicate balance that he's kind of playing with here. So I'm just eager to see how this is going to, what's his end game ultimately? Is it to leverage, or is it really because he wants autonomy for Alberta?
Melissa, what do you think?
Well, look, I think there's a palpable anger in Alberta. We've seen it. We've seen it since the election. We've seen it before the election. And Premier Kenney has tapped into that. And we often talk about politicians not giving enough detail. And then when the speech is an hour and detailed about how they're going to do something, then it's too much or it's too pragmatic. Look, he's put forward a plan, and to accuse, a federalist of stroking frankly, separatism, I just don't think it works here. He's put together something that isn't new, frankly, in Alberta or in sort of in the common thinking of what Alberta has wanted, but he's putting it on the table as something constructive that they can land a better, fairer deal for him.
Brad, you were nodding there.
Well, to the point that these are not new cards that Mr. Kenney is playing. These go back decades to varying degrees. He's put them all together. But I think the first step is acknowledging that there is frustration in the province of Alberta. But what's interesting, and I think it speaks to the points that have been made. How much is this about leverage, or how much is this truly about having no RCMP but having an Alberta provincial police? I don't believe that the frustrations stemming directly, the solutions that Mr. Kenney is outlining aren't directly related to the frustration. The frustration, I think, is based on economics. Yeah. This is a province that has, when oil is good, it does create tremendous amounts of wealth, not only in Alberta, but for all of Canada, and that's good for all of Canada. But when oil prices go down, this is the challenge that the province is facing. I don't know what a provincial pension plan or a provincial police force will solve on that front. Mr. Kenney, in the election campaign, talked a lot about diversifying the economy, creating jobs. He's just brought in a $4.6 billion corporate tax cut to bring about jobs. We haven't seen the fruits of that, but it's early days. He needs to, I think, draw the frustration, tap into it, and focus on the economy, because it's not about pension plans or police.
He did include in that list, things like guarantees on the completion of TMX, funding to create green jobs, support for future LNG projects. I take your point, though, that the list was a long one and it included a number of things. Kelly, I'll give you the last word in this segment.
Well, you have heard Jason Kenney shoot down ideas of separatism pretty sternly recently, I'd say in the last month or two. You also heard him speak to people who would rather do all these things, have Alberta withdraw from the CPP and the RCMP contract right away. He said, basically, we have to be strategic. We have to keep our eye on the ball. And the main goal here is to get the Trans Mountain expansion built. He listed a couple other things, but he said, the economy is the main thing. And he said, for anybody who wants to go off in other directions, you have to keep your eye on the ball on this. And I think, if there's a takeaway from his speech upon second listening, that was it for me.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.